Regulatory capture, is one of the biggest issues we have.
And in related news.
By the way, another insane statistic, just sorry to interrupt, I saw this today. I forgot, someone we know tweeted this. Who wants to guess the ratio of administrators to doctors in the US healthcare system?
300 to 1.
Yeah, I saw it 300 to 1, yeah.
900 to 1 today.
Oh my God.
And that is up from 5 to 1 in 1970.
By the way, can I just build on what you said?
900 to 1.
Your initial tweet said 300 to 1, and it ended in 2010, right before Obamacare passed. So from 300 to 900 was all Obamacare.
Yeah. Regulatory capture. Sachs is shaking his head.
Which, by the way, nothing against Obamacare, because I think, coming as a Canadian, I actually believe in subsidized healthcare, and I think the principle of Obamacare was great. But there was one fatal flaw, which is it basically said, okay, you know what? You're capped at the following margin. And the minute that people said, wait a minute, I can only have a 20% gross margin, what do? You just jack up the prices to basically jack up revenue. Because if you can only take 20%, you're going to take 20% of a bigger number than a smaller number. And so it completely burned the incentives for any healthcare company in the United States to do anything other than just basically walk prices up. And it's funny because if you look at the stock prices of these companies, you would have made more money being long United Healthcare than you would have been owning Facebook, Google, any of these other tech companies in the last decade. Crazy stat.
Speaking of regulatory capture, Tesla got left out of this new tax credit or proposed tax credit.
Insane.
For electric cars. I don't know if you saw that, but Tesla wasn't invited a couple of months ago to Biden's EV summit. Elon responded I wonder why I wasn't invited. It turns out it's because they're not a union shop. Their employees make much more money than union employees make. But now as a punishment, the $12,000 credit that they're giving to, or they're proposing to give to all EV manufacturers is only if you have union employees. It's $4,500 less to Tesla. So literally 2 massive regulatory captures and corruption go. Or maybe Sachs.
No, I don't have much more to add to that. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, this is to serve the unions. It's not to serve clean energy or the EV industry. I mean, a little bit for EV, but it's mostly for the unions.
On the one hand, what we do is we say that climate change is this existential issue. But then when the rubber meets the road, if you look inside the infrastructure plan today, we unveiled basically how we're going to do all the tax credits. And again, it's just an enormous amount of just sloppy regulatory capture. We're doubling and tripling credits in certain places. We're disallowing credits in other places. When you follow the dollars, what happens is you can map it to companies. Those companies tend to be mostly public, large balance sheets, large lobbying efforts. And it's not necessarily the most important companies that matter. So if I said to you, what are the most important companies in climate change? You'd probably say, well, maybe it's direct air capture, maybe it's nuclear, maybe it's some other thing that basically helps you go to a different place. And where does all the tax credits and tax dollars go? Sunrun, SunPower. These are companies that basically, have this oligopolistic stranglehold on essentially installing solar panels and battery walls in homes across the United States. And it's not to say that that job isn't important, but to basically explicitly block other people out, because all the chatter today on, or some of the chatter today was around just, if this bill passes as written, you're going to see these stocks rip. And so obviously the positive reinforcement loop of Wall Street and hedge funds getting behind these companies, their market cap goes up, the amount they allocate to lobbyists go up, and then all this bullshit just continues to cycle through the system.
Freeberg, how far are we away from small nuclear reactors and fusion, just from a science perspective, and then on a regulatory basis?
I don't know enough. I mean, yeah. Look, I mean, from what I've seen, there are great technologies that, we should be able to kind of realize. My understanding, and speaking to investors, some in this room, and I know Chamath's looked at this area a lot, is, there's the regulatory burden that's made it so difficult to launch nuclear. Technically, it seems like there's great breakthroughs. There was an announcement from a group this past week, CFS, yeah, on a new superconducting magnet system that they spent years designing. This is a Bill Gates-backed company. Anyone here an investor? No.
Jan.
Huh? None.
No?
And basically, it enables the tokamak plasma fusion-based systems to be kind of reliably produced now. And so they've had a proof of demonstration of this superconducting magnet system that effectively allows you to control a plasma, which is like 10 million degrees Celsius, in a little donut that spins around. And that plasma allows you to kind of pull energy out that can be used for, effectively you put a bunch of material in, this thing runs, and more energy comes out than you put in. It's magic. And so, this has been a theoretical kind of concept for decades. Getting the superconducting magnet system to control the plasma in a very small space, using a very small kind of system, was proven. And now they think that they're, call it 4 or 5 years away. By the way, everything in nuclear is always 4 or 5 years away. So 4 or 5 years away with a grain of salt from kind of having a demonstrable kind of system. So there's technologies that are clearly like on the brink or proceeding nicely, but as we know, a lot of these sorts of technologies similarly are kind of regulatory burdened.
We're about 100 degrees away, I think, from a operational, functional room temperature semiconductor, and superconductor. Sorry, and I've told a team that I'm working with on this project, I don't want to go into energy generation, or unless we can do it in a small form manufacturing thing that can be adopted broadly. But if you try to go and, basically build some distributed energy resource out over here that powers Cavallo Point, it's impossible because you run into these people who don't really understand the science, won't take the time. And, we've taken so many steps backwards from nuclear that it's probably just going to take decades, and it's going to take some cataclysmic climate change event where the only way out is this super abundant energy source where you're willing to basically say, fuck it, we're fucked otherwise.
By the way, if you were to go to Mars today, you wouldn't be pulling a bunch of fucking, oil out of the ground and burning it and, rotating.
You shouldn't.
And you wouldn't necessarily, you'd be using, solar at the beginning, but you wouldn't necessarily rely on solar. The cost of material to transport from here to Mars to yield the best energy potential would likely be some sort of nuclear power source, right? As it is in a lot of military systems.
Can I ask you a question, Sachs? Elon was saved by Obama. Just kind of like we were there, meaning like, it was in that moment, he was able to get that deal with Daimler. He was able to get these, tax credits, the auto bailout, all of that stuff. But then it seems like we're in the middle of a Democrat administration and they may go out of their way to basically try to fuck this guy.
I just think it's like become a special interest free for all. There was an article today that the national deficit year to date is 2.7 trillion. And I think that we're on an October 1st fiscal year, so there's one more month, so it'll be about 3 trillion. Last year it was over 3 trillion because of COVID. They haven't gotten to the infrastructure bill yet. That's going to be another 1.2 trillion. On top of that, the Democrats are saying they want another 3.5. Well, not all Democrats, but thank God for Joe Manchin, but another 3.5 trillion. And, most people can't even really say what's in that $3.5 trillion bill. We were at 28 trillion, something like that, of national debt. And it's all just like special interest plunder.
Well, if you look at the results aren't there, correct?
Yeah. And then on top of that, I understand. With respect to Obamacare, okay, that's a major item on, let's call it the Democrat wish list, was to give everyone health care. And we didn't even get there. Okay. But you can sort of understand that. But most people, I think, even on the left, can't really say what the big ticket item is that's going to be delivered for this 3.5 trillion that is proposing to be spent. So, it's just become this special interest free fall.